Given the opportunity to redraft, would you still want the Denver Broncos to make the same selections they did in the first and second round? And how have Sean Payton's needs in the offseason changed for this upcoming offseason compared to the conversations we were having this time last year? All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to that Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel. You can find us at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also watch us on X or on Facebook, but regardless of the platform of your choosing, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, get in on the conversation, get involved in the action, and turn on those post notifications so that you never miss a moment with us. And if you need an extra reason to like and subscribe to that Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel, we just posted a video of a multi-week, basically month-long prank executed by Mike Evans and Mark Schlereth on their fellow co-host Brandon Stokely, titled The Hair Witch Project. I have seen it. It's already blown up across all of our social media platforms. If you haven't seen it, go watch it on our Denver Sports YouTube channel at Denver Sports 1043 right after you get done watching this. Let's get into it. Plenty to get into today about the Denver Broncos and an interesting thought exercise inspired by ESPN, who put out a redraft of the first two rounds of the 2020 NFL draft now that the 2025 season is basically in the books, save for the Super Bowl that will finish this Sunday. And when it comes to the Denver Broncos, as was the other 31 teams in the NFL, the question is, what pick would or should the Broncos have made or make again if they could do it over with the knowledge that they know now? So I want to go round by round here with the Denver Broncos, because that pick at number 20, I think, surprised a lot of people here in Broncos country, fan base, media alike. The selection of Jahdae Barron, the standout corner from the University of Texas, who has that hybrid flexibility as a secondary player to play inside, to play outside on the boundary, to mix in at safety because of his size and durability. And I think that it just surprised a lot of people because of the needs that they had that were explicitly stated going into that offseason. Needs like addressing the running back room, which they ultimately did in the second round. Needs like the tight end room, which they did with Evan Ingram in free agency, but it still kind of felt a little bit top heavy with a lot of unknown as it relates to that portion of the offensive skill positions. And instead they go with Jahdae Barron and add Barron as a top 20 pick in the NFL draft to a room that includes the reigning defensive player of the year, a capable starting corner in Riley Moss, a underrated and at times underrecognized third corner in Jaquan McMillan. So you add Jahdae Barron to that trio. Jahdae Barron is obviously a good player, but I think now it's an interesting thought exercise to say, you know what? Did we get enough out of the running back room? Did we get enough out of the tight end room? Did we get enough out of other positions on the roster? Or now with the contract decisions that are going to be faced in the interior defensive line or on defense in general, like the inside linebacker position, could they have and should they have gone a different direction? Jeff Legwold, ESPN's writer for the Denver Broncos, long-standing tenured figure in the media here in the Mile High City, he said, as a part of ESPN's thought exercise that went market by market and team by team, that the Broncos would and should maintain the same selection in a redraft scenario and select Jahdae Barron at 20. And what's interesting about that is in ESPN's exercise, all of the running backs in the NFL draft at the top of that class were still available. Ashton Jeanty did not go before number 20. Omarion Hampton obviously did not go before 20 when the Broncos were on the clock. So in Jeff Legwold's redraft opinion, not only should the Broncos make the same selection that they made in Jahdae Barron, but they should do so without Ashton Jeanty being potentially available as an addition to the running back room. The two tight ends, Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, both did go before 20, so there wasn't that kind of tantalizing option there as well. And you'll remember there was a lot of speculation that Sean Payton might have been very interested in moving up for a top-tier playmaking tight end, and Colston Loveland was certainly linked to Payton and the Broncos in that regard. I disagree with Jeff Legwold's assertion that Jahdae Barron should be the same pick at number 20 in a redraft setting compared to what we got before. I understand George Payton's logic that was spelled out over the course of the pre and post draft process when selecting Jahdae Barron over a running back like Omarion Hampton, who was there, when he said, we're not going to step over Crystal just because we need a blender. We are not going to pigeonhole ourselves into a need the way that so many teams overdraft at specific positions, primarily quarterback, because they so desperately need one, and it has a domino effect to the rest of their roster. Jahdae Barron is a player that the Broncos and George Payton had ranked as a top 10 or 15 player in the entire draft, and they were able to select him at 20. So they weren't going to supersede the opportunity to bring in a player like that just because they had a desperate need, quote unquote, at another position. That's why they ended up going with RJ Harvey in the second round, trading back twice to do so. I disagree with the notion that you wouldn't draft a different player than Jahdae Barron in that setting if you were given the opportunity to redraft in the 2025 class. Jahdae Barron is a talented player, and he has flexibility in a secondary role where he can be a boundary corner in the outside. In theory, he can play inside in the slot. He also has the size and the physicality to be able to mix in probably as a safety option, whether it's nickel, dime, or at the safety position because of his versatility at the University of Texas. But the Broncos did not win the gamble, in my opinion, of passing on a running back of a higher caliber and getting the return on investment with RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins as a backfield duo. I would absolutely, in a redraft setting, have wanted the Broncos and urged the Broncos to select Ashton Genty in ESPN's scenario, to select Omarion Hampton, who was on the board in reality without a redraft scenario, or even overdraft, technically at the time, the likes of a Quinshon Judkins or a Travion Henderson. J.K. Dobbins going down made this Denver Broncos offense one-dimensional in a way that it was very commonly labeled as last season, and it hamstrung their ability at times to be as consistent or as explosive as they needed to be, which has a ripple effect in Sean Payton's play calling, in different personnel schemes and groupings, and overall in the effectiveness of the offense. Jahdae Barron only played 20% of the total defensive snaps of the season. If you're going to tell me that I could take a first-round pick that's going to play 20% of the snaps on defense in a room that has 3 all-pros already there, when you're talking about the Broncos secondary with PS2, Jaquan McMillan, and Talanoa Hufanga, or I can select a running back who at the start of the season is probably going to play a little bit of second fiddle to J.K. Dobbins, but by week 10 is going to be relied upon as the focal point of a backfield in his rookie season for a team that needs to go, that has aspirations to go to a Super Bowl and ends up making it to an AFC Championship game. Give me a running back for the Broncos in the first round 10 times out of 10 if given the opportunity to redraft. As we get into the second round, let's hit the turn presented by the Birdie Bar, Louisville's premier outdoor golf bar and entertainment venue. With their miniature golf setup and heated patio, they have the perfect cure for your winter blues. All right, so we went through the first round scenario and ESPN's thought exercise of redrafting the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft for all 32 teams. Jeff Legwold of ESPN, who was the contributor for the Denver Broncos in this thought exercise, suggested that the Broncos should and would take Jahdae Barron at 20, the same way they did in the actual draft in a redraft setting, even though all of the running backs in this class in a redraft format were available because of other moves that happened from 1 to 19. I disagree with that assertion, and I think that the Broncos would be much better suited if they had selected Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, any of the running backs that went off the board prior to Jahdae Barron or even RJ Harvey in the second round. I think the Broncos would have been better off offensively moving in that direction. So that brings us to the second round in this redraft exercise. The Broncos trade back twice from 51 to select RJ Harvey on the back end of the second round, the running back out of the University of Central Florida. And there are things to like about RJ Harvey. 12 scrimmage touchdowns is pretty significant for a rookie contributor who was playing a 1B or second fiddle option for half of his NFL season. But RJ Harvey did not, to me, profile and live up to the bill as somebody who could step in and fill the shoes that J.K. Dobbins had set forth through the first month and a half of the season, especially considering how different it made the offense when they had a top 10 and fringe top 5 rushing attack in the National Football League to complement Bo Nix's continued development as a passer. So if my scenario were to be true, I've already taken care of the running back position in my mind with a first-round selection. In ESPN's thought exercise, Jeff Legwold in the second round suggested that the Broncos wouldn't take RJ Harvey in the second round, but that they would go with Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. He ended up going to the Los Angeles Rams and had a fairly reasonable and productive season as a part of that offense, despite the weapons that are at Matthew Stafford's disposal in LA. I agree with Jeff Legwold's assertion here. We disagreed in the first round, but I agree with the assertion here because Evan Ingram was, in my opinion, I would say arguably, but I don't think it's that significant an argument. I think Evan Ingram was the most disappointing acquisition in hindsight for the Broncos this season. And I think that's unfortunate because of what we thought Evan Ingram was going to be able to do and what we felt like he was capable of. Along with my Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan cohort, stood on the sidelines at training camp and watched Evan Ingram's route running ability, his ability to manipulate the middle of the field, and his savviness as a veteran receiver to be able to find pockets in zone and still have the athleticism to make plays happen in man coverage. We all came to a consensus that Evan Ingram was going to eat in this offense. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, and likely a combination, it just didn't happen. Whether he and Bo Nix were not on the same page, whether Sean Payton's scheme did not mesh with Evan Ingram's skill set as much as he thought it would, or certainly would have liked to. Evan Ingram was very vocal about his role over the course of the season and thinking he's capable of doing more, wanting to do more, and being disappointed with the way things were unfolding. I still think the Broncos would have been better off selecting a tight end in the second round than they were drafting RJ Harvey. It's not that there wasn't anything to like about RJ Harvey in a rookie setting, but I don't feel confident in RJ Harvey's sophomore season buildup here that he is going to be capable of somebody that you're going to be able to roll out as a 1,000-yard rusher, as the lead face in a backfield that may or may not, and very likely will not feature J.K. Dobbins as the face of it anymore. If it were me redrafting the second round for the Denver Broncos after I already selected a running back in the first round, passing on Jahdae Barron, I would still take a tight end in the second round to match Jeff Legwold's assertion or his kind of thoughts on the process in ESPN's redraft exercise. Because I think outside of Terrence Ferguson, there were other names theoretically available at that time. You had Orandre Gadsden out of Syracuse, who came on midway through the season for the Chargers as a legitimate receiving threat and somebody that could have done, in my opinion, what we thought Evan Ingram would have been able to do. How about Harold Fannin Jr., who went to the Cleveland Browns and was a weapon for not only Joe Flacco, but also Shadur Sanders. So two quarterbacks, one of which being a rookie, found opportunities and ways to use Harold Fannin as a significant weapon in the passing game on an offense that's not lighting the world on fire from a talent perspective. If the Broncos had the opportunity to redraft their first two rounds and were able to walk away with a running back and a tight end with names like Omarion Hampton, in theory, Ashton Genty in ESPN's exercise, but even if you want to factor that out, Omarion Hampton was there in real life. Travion Henderson was there in real life. Quinshon Judkins was there in real life. All options for the Broncos to be able to take in the first round. In the second round, from Terrence Ferguson or Andre Gadsden, or if you wanted to take a tight end earlier, Harold Fannin was available in a trade-up scenario and things of that nature. RJ Harvey did not prove to me in his rookie season, which Sean Payton said infamously or famously, that the running back position is something you can tell pretty quick about whether or not it's going to mesh and develop, and there's not as much blossoming that you feel like needs to take place compared to other positions. the Broncos would have been better off selecting a tight end, in my opinion, in the second round than they would have taking RJ Harvey. Obviously, you can't go back in the Wayback Machine and figure all these things out with the benefit of hindsight. It is an interesting thought exercise, and it does kind of point to the fact that feels like some of the needs for the Denver Broncos that we were talking about last offseason are rolled over needs once again, which is a point of frustration maybe with the free agent haul and the draft process that they went through last offseason. Because I still think the Broncos are going to be looking for a playmaking tight end in free agency and or the draft. Still think the Broncos are going to have running back pretty firmly on their radar through both phases of the NFL offseason when they're talking about bringing players in. So the needs, there's been more needs that have popped up. I think you might have to consider making some additions, certainly in the interior defensive line, potentially in the linebacker room, maybe even at the wide receiver position with how thin things got toward the end of the year there for the Broncos. So more needs have popped up, but two very critical needs in running back and tight end playmaking ability are still firmly in play for the Broncos in 2026, just as they were going into 2025. We have plenty to monitor this week as it relates to the Denver Nuggets, who lost a tough one to the Detroit Pistons for the second time in a span of about 8 days, with one of the hotter surging Eastern Conference teams in the league this year. And they have a quick turnaround with the New York Knicks coming up later today, plus the Avalanche, who are headed for an Olympic break with some pretty significant feeling or speculation that they're going to be active at the trade deadline or as it ramps up, just as Chris McFarland has done for multiple seasons now as kind of a wheeler and dealer over there at Ball Arena. Lots to be excited about. The Super Bowl is this weekend. We will put a final pin in the 2025 NFL season, and then all eyes will be moving forward on the Denver Broncos as they prepare for 2026 with a new offensive coordinator, with the retention of their defensive coordinator and some shuffling of the pieces on both sides of the ball as Bo Nix enters an ever-important year 3 of his development in his young NFL career. Thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to that Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan YouTube channel, and we will catch you tomorrow at noon for the next rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work. My only improve is crazy, but it don't take no effort. The way that I move.